Diego, Isshaq, these are from the master student.
Ah, hi.
And Isshaq wants to come Monday too.
Yeah, I'm joining, of course.
Yeah.
I'm looking forward. What time?
At 10 o'clock we are starting.
Okay.
We are starting now?
Yes, we can start. I think also they're recording
Okay.
our conversation already. No, we're starting.
Yes. What an audience. We have the most interested audience. Shall I start?
Please.
It is 15 past 7?
Yeah, 18 actually.
18, okay. We're doing together our presentation, but Campus and Camp, Diego and Isshaq, and me, in this fellowship program, we are actually separate. I mean, we know each other before, we collaborated in Palestine. I visited, I know Isshaq before, and we have some common, some kind of research and interest that comes together and goes in a different way and then comes together again. This is why, like maybe you remember, end of September, we had together a kind of presentation, discussion about refugeehood, hospitality, and camps. And we decided again today to do it together. But it doesn't mean that we are doing together a project or we did a project during the fellow week. It doesn't mean that, but I think we have a lot of crossing concept and through our thinking practice, and we share a lot together, so we decided to be together. We called our title, it's a bit long, Toward a Voluntary Exile, Unconditional Hospitality and Islands. So this is a kind of combination about, I wrote a piece about, called God's Asking Us to Exile on Archipelago and Voluntary Exile. I can, if you're interested, I can give it. It's a kind of poetic piece. Today we were not sure what to do. First we thought we can read this text, but then we changed our mind. Yes, if you're interested. But Unconditional Hospitality and Islands. So this whole sentence is a bit thick, bit long, but actually it has physical directly physical attachment, and it's also metaphorical. So voluntary exile is also, for me, has a meaning being a seriously physically in exile, like leaving all your belongings and by force going somewhere that you don't want to live there, but mostly this somewhere is either a rural space, either an island, or a kind of non-social, alone, solitude space. So it has two meanings generally. In a physical reality sense, any power can exile you, can force you to leave, and you go somewhere. And if you don't want to negotiate and accept what they want, these powers, these people, these tools, machine, whatever, you generally decide to leave. So any exile is voluntary, I think. This is our understanding. Unconditional hospitality and islands. Hospitality we spoke in the beginning also about, and it has a kind of unconditionality comes from that any hospitality, host and hostage and hospitality and any kind of condition has any kind of situation has a condition. Hospitality without condition is not possible. So it also reminds us the borders and our experience with different territories and our condition that is that we are in and conditions that is posed to us. And islands, both Diego and Isshaq were in Medellin Island last spring, and I had an experience also in different kind of I'm living near, my homeland is near an island, a Greek island. I'm from Turkish side, so I'm very much familiar with islands and the situation there. So islands is, again, has a metaphorical meaning, being in exile and solitude, and but then it has a real meaning for us, for Palestinian islands in cities, in Palestinian towns and camps and villages that has been segregated from each other. And then islands on the sea in the real sense, that you want to cross the sea, cross the islands and reach somewhere, and being in an island. So this text that is a poetic text that brings all together, but this title was the stick title toward voluntary exile, unconditional hospitality and islands, is a little bit both metaphoric, both our own experience that is applying to whole the refugee condition, border crossing, and so on. I will speak a little bit, 15 minutes. We don't have so much, and then I will give the word to Isshaq. It's so difficult to describe what all year what we did. We will continue. Already we had many site research going on, and during the year we continued our own practice and research. But what was different for me and for us was we were into discussion always, and we were together with the fellow in a collective thinking process, and this is why it was a special experience for me, for us. This week I drew this map, the field, because I'm working in a different villages, town, seashore, islands, territories, which has different scale, which has a different social fabric, different kind of cosmologies. But all those fields are filled with violent, traumatic memories, filled with exile and exiled condition and situation, filled with warfare, and then there are other layers of geology that most of those places are archaeological site, Neolithical site, where I'm living in Mardin, and around Mardin, Dara, Lice, Nusaybin, all those cities, they are also used to be Hellenistic and Roman settlement, and most of them are archaeological site too. But then those areas, those region is kind of traumatic, violent territories. So I work also in China a lot, and since 1 year it became more intense that I was researching in my region, and then also in China and in different kind of places like the Greek islands. So it looks like very different places, very different languages, different people, different layers. But always for me is how to be in the field as a researcher, and then how to really cultivate the collectivity in those fields. And I mean, research for me is not a kind of positivist, naked, empiric experience. Yeah, and this was something very confusing for us this year, because we were talking a lot about artistic research and methodologies, and this fellowship program, most of us are from different practice, but we have very, 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 very common interests, and the medium that we are using is different. So research and methods and the field and the archives and the territories and the medium, they all became very questionable and very important cases for us. So we discussed that those whole year a lot. Can we continue with the images that I can show a little bit? I don't have so much time, but we can continue. Diego, you can put just, yes, more on top. That simultaneously you can put on top, yeah. This is what we were discussing last September together on autonomous infrastructure in refugee camps, and I moved more focusing on the village of Dara, that which is very near to Mardin. Is a kind of archaeological small village. Used to be a Assyrian village, but is now a Kurdish village. We are working with some artists, Turkish and Arabic and Kurdish artists from Mardin, from Kızıltepe together, and from Nusaybin. We are working also since 3 years. A city called Lice is also north of Mardin. And Lice was very violently destroyed, bombed for a long time. And also the city faced an earthquake in the 70s. And there is a kind of neighborhood with very small tree street and houses like that. These are containers that were installed by some German architects with the inhabitants together after the earthquake. And in the 70s, so still people are living there. And we are working on this neighborhood too. I conducted many material research also. And this is a kind of piece that was a soft material in the 70s, which became a stone, transformed into a stone in some years. This is from Dara, a piece probably like Roman period. It's in a garden of a mosque. And this is an old 1915 train, the train to Baghdad from Istanbul. This is the only piece is lasted. It stopped in the 40s because of, again, war, conflict between Syria and so on. And this is one of the neighborhood in Nusaybin, which was totally bombed. There was an urban warfare. And then totally destroyed. I think 3 neighborhoods is a large space. And new housings coming up. I think like it will host 20,000 people. It was very quick in 1 year how everything destroyed, and then new houses came out. I think I don't have so much time, but we can put very quickly the images, and it is different kind of scale for me and different kind of social fabrics. We have a question here, I mean 3 questions. One is, I think the most important for me, how is knowledge shaped by social fabric? I mean, this is a very simple question, but I think the more important question is, what is the social fabric? How the social fabric differs from different territories and with different experience, and how as a researcher we can deal with that, how we can switch from different kind of notion of social fabric that forms the space and territories and societies, and how we can move with different kind of methodologies, and even we can how we can invest new methods of researching. I think I can pass to Isshaq, but there are some images you will see from a Chinese village. Is in Anhui, in the village called Nanyang village. I'm working there now with some activists, Chinese activists. This village is a 20 years old cooperative. They just celebrated 2 weeks ago. And this was established in the end of 90s after a struggle against the farmer tax policy that imposed by the Chinese government. And this cooperative is member has 700 villagers, and I think 3 village is formed this cooperative, and they're building and they're doing a lot of art engagement projects. It's a very poor village and cooperative actually, but they are producing some product also and selling it. So currently we're trying to help, like my friend Hong Song, together. And I think I can pass a little bit to Isshaq. Isshaq can continue, and then we can discuss. I mean, we are very looking forward for your questions also, that we can talk together. Yeah.
Shall we switch places,
Yes.
maybe, so I can see this?
We do that. Okay, we switched last time too. Now again.
Different switch.
Different switch.
It's all about the shift and
Yes,
as well.
yes.
Yes. Hi. Of course, we would like for this to be as informal as possible. So let's take this as a form of conversation as well between Pelin and I, but also with you. And I thought the best way to do these 15 minutes is perhaps to take you through how we came to exist in this research, and share with you a part of the process that we have, and the experience that we have lived together. So Diego and I, we come from an experimental educational program called Campus in Camps. It was established in 2012 in a Palestinian refugee camp called Dehesha in Bethlehem. And the idea was to rather bring the university campus to the refugee camp in order for the university campus to learn about the kind of knowledge that exists in the refugee camp. And in 2016, we were invited by BAC to take part in a 5 days let's say living workshops with We Are Here in Amsterdam, as well as students from HAKU and other participants too. And in these 5 days, we precisely worked on something that was rather came to establishment during Campus in Camps, that we call the collective dictionary. And as easy as it sounded, we basically choose a term and we try to define this term based on our experience and the experience of the participants, but also the experience of the space itself. And after living this experience, we were particularly looking at the term political, trying to define the term political. After we finished, Diego and I were absolutely astonished by the value of this living experience here in the Netherlands, right? And we thought, how could we continue to build on this? How could we sort of, instead of just, work in an extreme local environment, which is the Palestinian refugee camp, how could this something exist in other spaces too? So we start to have this conversation, and then when we received the invitation for the fellowship, we thought to continue on the same level. From this came what we call now al-maisha. And al-maisha is an Arabic term that literally in English means living, right? So it's something in process, just like our research now, and the fact that it will continue also after the fellowship. And the way we understand al-maisha is rather a communal learning environment, and we precisely try to look into hospitality and neighboring as radical political acts. What you see on the first image on the top, the tiny one, this is an image that we took in Palestine sometimes in 2013, I think. And this image, we decided to take it with us to Sardinia when we were there in the end of 2016. 2016? In August. August last year, yeah. And the idea, we call it, can you still hear me? Yeah. We call it shifting image because we thought we want to capture a moment of living and take it with us to the other place that we are going in order to indicate that the process is still happening. The experience is happening and it moves, it travels between different spaces. And the other image you see is what we call the shifting image of the Netherlands. So it reflects part of our experience in Sardinia, but it exists here in the Netherlands. These tents, the two small tents, is basically the kind of environment we were living in Sardinia. We were hosted in a farm, beautiful nature too, and the wall also reflect on a particular experience that we had in Sardinia that we thought is quite interesting to have it in the image and bring it to the Netherlands. Maybe we can. Hey. Yeah, we will come to this. Maybe we can go a bit on the recent workshop with the moving together, since we're talking about hospitality. This is a workshop we did sometimes in May 17th, during the Moving Together week, when Angela Davis visited the Netherlands, and Bach hosted the workshop. And precisely we were talking about hospitality here. And for us, it was really interesting because we took advantage of this moment to also speak a little bit about the kind of methodology we would like to have in our work. Something some of you might be familiar with is what we call al-mujawara, which basically when you end up in this environment where people choose to be together in order to converse over particular topic or an issue. And we also introduced two Arabic terms, ahali and hayan, just to link this a little bit to the social fabric that Pelin was talking about earlier. So hay, it means neighborhood, but the literal meaning in Arabic, it means aliveness. And Arabs, of course, pay attention to the fact is what characterizes a neighborhood is aliveness. And ahali, it means in this context people in community, but its literal meaning is families, because also what constitutes a neighborhood usually is a family, and family most likely, let's say, have always good relation. This was quite interesting, actually, workshop we had, because first, participants were very generous to actually bring in their personal story, which is not necessarily easy, always. And it's also still in process, so we lately got in touch and trying to understand together how could this continue to develop, so it's not like a 2 hours workshop, but rather something that we continue to have. So we currently sort of like exchanging stories, because stories we perceive as a fundamental knowledge, in fact something that can fly from one place to another and can be used by different people as well. How am I doing with time? Okay, so maybe we maybe it's the most important thing to share now is our experience in Lesbos. So we went to Lesbos for the first time in February as part of our research here with Bank, and we collaborated with a new born NGO called Office of Displaced Designers. And their office exists in Mytilene, quite actually interesting space, but very cruel, because we know Lesbos is the closest island to Turkey, and it's the space where most of the refugees are, being across the sea to enter Europe. A very segregated small islands. And we went there. We were working with refugees and local people, if I'm putting it right, local people, for 2 weeks. And the idea was Of course, it was challenging because the three of us are different. Our position in the space, of course, is very different. But we wanted to live this experience together. And we thought, of course, the perfect way to live this experience together is by working on the collective dictionary. So we took a bit of time in trying to decide which term fits best the three of us, Diego, myself, and of course, I forgot to mention our colleague, Elena Isayev. And we chose after a couple of days the term inhabiting. And we thought it's quite actually interesting because we were questioning how do we inhabit the space temporarily as visitors, how the local inhabiting the space, and how are the refugees also inhabiting the space. Of course, I will not refer a lot to the publication, but you can access it by visiting View Al-Maisha, or we can pass it to you after we finish this. Do you want to elaborate on? In this experience also we relied a lot on walks because we always like to bring walks also as a way of living, in fact as a actually tool of knowledge. So we walked from Moria refugee camp all the way to Mytilene, something around 2 hours, 2 hours and a half walk. And this path you see is basically what the refugees take to connect with the city. During this walk, we were connecting with each other, trying to sort of like share our different experiences and trying to learn, of course, from each other, but also precisely focusing on the notion of inhabiting. What does inhabiting mean to us? By the end of this experience, of course, we ODD in their work, they always like to set up what they call an exhibition in order to also invite the public, in this regard the local, to come and see the work of mainly the refugees who take part in this organization. I think it was quite actually interesting, but it was also very, very difficult experience. Speaking of also the social fabric, because of course, I mean, which is actually quite interesting because when you think of this space, and it seems like it has a great reputation in terms of hospitality, like people-wise. But it was really interesting to look how hospitality is greatly changing now due to political depression and, of course, frustrations. Yeah, maybe we can communicate this.
We have 5 minutes left.
Is that?
Yes.
Yeah.
And we just started, we didn't say anything. But we were thinking that the last 5 minutes, maybe you can ask us some question that we can talk about.
Yeah.
Any question or
I mean, it doesn't have to be a question. It could also be
comments and. Yeah, I think. What is your methodology? I think this is one of the difficult parts because we together, especially when we discuss about that, I'm coming from a certain more academic method background, and then there are many other part is very artistic, and this is a lot of discussed a lot what the methodology of artistic research is, or what is the methodology of spatial practices, critical spatial practices is. And then there is another discussion going on also in social science for a long time. What is the field? What is our position in the field? What is our position as a researcher? What is our position as a subjectivities who are directly facing the same violence facing the same, exile facing the same, and how we can find our own methods, transversal method, let's say what I call it, that that borrows from different kind of ways, and you make the method. There's a nice Turkish saying, but it's difficult to translate. But you do the method on the way, yeah. I think it sounds very unstructural and non-analytical, but I think it has its own analytical structure inside it. So it's not so much free floating. What I showed in the beginning, what I talked in the beginning, unconditional hospitality and being in an exile, both has its own certain ethics, and transversal method demands ethics and experience. Either my experience, as I showed, different kind of scale of spaces, from villages to more different kind of traumatic spaces where I live, where we are floating and researching around. And then Isshaq's experience, one is the last experience, is inhabiting the Mytilene experience, and how to position ourselves. I mean, we call ourselves, yes, not researcher, because on one hand we are not outside of the field. Yeah, there is no distance between the field and the researcher subject. You know, we are directly into that, and this makes more difficult actually to find a certain methods and how to situate the ethics of this certain methods.
Can I just
yes.
briefly?
You don't have a...
No, I can speak loud. You can hear me, no? I think that the first attempt also when we move is to get thanks. Is to try also to shut up a little bit our methodology. I mean, I think that every one of us has a quite clear idea on how to move. But the first time you enter a new environment and you enter in relation, in a way we also think that to be in an honest relation is about listening a lot. So it is exactly the time when you reshape also, or you add things, or you, let's say, subtract things to your methodology. And so it's quite hard to say there is a methodology, like a pack, like a bundle of things. Of course, Pelin has her own one. We have, I think, more tools, some tools that we rely upon, like design, I mean, walking, as Isshaq just mentioned. And Mujawara actually is a way of doing. It's not a tool because it's made of people, but Mujawara is like a gathering, basically. Just imagine an assembly, no? And so while you build up a conversation during this assembly, it's also a matter of trust. And I don't know where to put actually trust in terms of methodology or tools. It's something that it happens and in a way demands time, no?
Yeah, I mean, I guess in our experience so far, what brought us with the other people has always been based on a mutual interest as well. I think this is very important to mention, because with mutual interest often comes honesty, I believe. I mean, of course, we can problematize that in many ways. But in terms of methodology also, we really refer a lot on the term tanakush in Arabic. In Arabic, it means discussion in English. But in Arabic, the literature meaning, it means when you chisel a stone, right? So you make it more beautiful, right? So it's not about winning the conversation, for instance, but rather really learning from the conversation. And that's where I see the honesty of the methodology in this regard.
I think another performance is starting. Wiske, can we continue? 3 minutes.
Perfect.
I don't know what to say in 3 minutes.
Hey?
I'm sorry?
How did you decide to work together?
Oh,
wow.
in the beginning, I explained, I think, in the very beginning, we don't work together. Campus and Camp is run by, especially the collective dictionary, run by Isshaq and Diego. And I work by myself, but in end of September, in the first week of the public week of the Back Fellowship program, we decided to be together because we had maybe different, in different way we are working, but sometimes we come together and we are dealing with the same experiences and same concepts, let's say. But of course, in the past, with Isshaq, we did run some workshops together in Palestine. We did some discussion about autonomous infrastructure, thinking the refugee camp as an autonomous infrastructure, again, as in a physical sense, in more architectural design and urban perspective, but also autonomous in a metaphoric sense. And we had this ongoing discussion, and by coincidence, when we were here communicating more during the fellowship program, we decided to also this last week to be here together again today. We have slightly different, let's say, understanding and methods, and we are working sometimes in the same places and different places, but I think we are coming together and then we're going our own understanding, shifting, yeah, and crossing and shifting. This is why we thought to be together today and discuss together. And we continue to work together also next year, this year. But also our pedagogical interest, maybe we can talk a lot about, it's like 2 minutes, we can talk 1.5 minutes. We have also a lot of, when you ask the method question, is also not about field and research, but is also about how to imagine alternative platforms of pedagogies. This was our main meeting 2 years ago in Palestine, in Campus and Camp. We really wanted to combine with very institutional structure of pedagogies and then into very kind of non-institutional practice of commons, you know, how to bring a pedagogical question, learning, listening, collective learning together. This is all very, this fascinates us a lot. This is why the question of pedagogy is also very important. Campus and Camp, either Campus and Camp or in my own activities. So I think this is also some kind of looking for how to produce collectively the knowledge, but also about how to find a way to institutionalize in a non-institutional way.
Practice institution.
We are trying to figure out that.
Yeah.
Yes.
Cool.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
We just we wish we had a longer time to show you a lot of things that we done in 1 year. This, I mean, since September, but you can always contact us directly, and we can give more time and explain what we are doing and what we have been doing since September under the Bach Fellowship program. Thank you very much.
door, a panel, bricks. A door,
These are the makings of
a
a
panel,
public space.
bricks.
Sound
Elevator,
experience.
door, panel, phone, wall, bricks.
Maybe mimic
A
something.
door, a panel, bricks. Door,
The public space is actually meant
Dark.
to sort of almost be still in
Wall.
time
wall,
and silent.
جاني جوابك وانا بتذكر في المشروع وعمايل جحفر ولما
Struck that these are the
بكيت يا
makings of a
ست
public
الدار.
space.
ايوه بكيت يا
Of like a site with no protests. And a site with no protests becomes the definition it's actually the equivalent of the imagined space. And so you reconstitute public space on your, it's a tool to do that actually. Because you start changing with the actual, with the
wall, door, a panel, bricks. A door,
it's a site
Panel.
for, at least I'm thinking sounds of
elevator, door, panel, phone,
and the teacups, I think, thinking that tea, drinking tea in
A
public
door.
could be
a panel,
something that,
door,
you know, it's a social,
Dark.
it's a collective thing.
Wall.
You sit down together and drink
Wall.
tea, whether it's with your family or friends, you know, it's a social activity, you know, in a
Wall.
way. And
door,
I was wondering if the sound in inviting, these are one of the sounds that I could invite, you know, into like, you know, between wall, door, window, wall. And, you know, you hear the clicking of you know, tea, you know.
وقلبك يا خرطوم شين سلبك حلبك وزنجك وبجتك ونوبتك
door,
وعربك
wall,
خرطوم شين
person,
حلبك زنجك
door, wall, opening, door, wall, wall, opening, a door, 1, 2, 3, a wall, 1, 2, 3, a door, a panel, bricks, a door,
These are the makings of
a
a
panel,
public space.
bricks,
Sound
elevator,
experience.
door, panel,
يعني
phone,
جوابك وانا
wall,
بتصور في
bricks,
ناس راشد
Maybe mimic
a
something.
door,
بشكلات
a
والحالة
panel,
يموت
bricks, door,
The public space is actually meant
Dark.
to sort of almost be still in
Wall.
time
wall,
and silent.
جاني جوابك وانا بتذكر في المشروع وعمايل جحفر ولما
Struck that
بكيت
these are the
يا
makings of a
ست
public
الدار.
space.
ايوه بكيت يا ست الدار.
Of like a site with no protests. And a site with no protests becomes the definition it's actually the equivalent of the imagined space. And so you reconstitute public space on your, it's a tool to do that actually. Because you start changing with the actual, with the
wall, 1, 2, 3, a door, a panel, bricks, a door,
it's a site
Panel.
for, at least I'm thinking sounds of
elevator, door, panel, phone,
and the teacups, I think, thinking that tea, drinking tea in public
A door.
could be
a panel,
something that,
door,
you know, it's a social,
Dark.
it's a collective thing.
Wall.
You sit down together and drink
Wall.
tea, whether it's with your family or friends, you know, it's a social activity, you know, in a
Wall.
way. And
door,
I was wondering if the sound in inviting, these are one of the sounds that I could invite, you know, into like, you know, between wall, door, window, wall. And, you know, you hear the clicking of you know, tea, you know.
وقلبك يا خرطوم شين سلبك حلبك وزنجك وبجتك ونوبتك
door,
وعربك
wall,
خرطوم شين
person,
سلبك حلبك زنجك
door,
الشاي عليك اشرب الشاي opening door الشاي عليك wall wall opening a door 1 2 3 a wall 1 2 3 a door a panel bricks a door
These are the makings of a
panel
public space.
bricks
Sound
elevator
experience.
door panel
يعني
phone
جوابك وانا
wall
بتصور في
bricks
ناس راشد
Maybe mimic
a
something.
door
في الشكلات
a panel
والحالة يموت.
bricks door
The public space is actually meant
Dark.
to sort of almost be still in
Wall.
time
wall
and silent.
يعني جوابك وانا بتذكر في المشروع وعمايل جحفر ولما
Struck that
بكيت
these are the
يا
makings of a
ست
public
الدار.
space.
ايوه بكيت يا ست الدار.
Of like a site with no protests. And a site with no protests becomes the definition of